All right, everyone. Welcome in to today's episode of the Pipeline Report. We're going to take a few seconds to make sure everything is working. We were having some technical difficulties with our streaming platform. And as you see there, as I check, trying to make sure everything is going through. Okay, it is.
Let's start with the No Kings rallies. You called these Hate America rallies. What do you mean by that?
Well, that collection of folks that I live.
My computer is going haywire. Let's make sure everything is working. I think Rumble is having an issue. Just give us 1 second as we get this figured out. So what happened is our main streaming platform. All right, we're on YouTube. Awesome. There we go. Okay. So on our main streaming platform that we use is having problems with the all-powerful Amazon. And there's an outage, and so we're having issues getting there and getting up. And it looks like one of them is actually not going through. So let me do some corrections here. We're up live and running. Today's going to be fun as we are able to get up and going and get rolling here. And just going to make sure everything's working as we get some kinks worked out. Today we want to talk about, and I'll go through this, and we're going to go through some videos. Today's going to be awesome. And we're going to go through some videos where we talk about the protests from this weekend. I mean, just the utter sheer nonsense of these protests is what we're seeing. And then we're live. All right. Glad everyone is able to join with us. Yes, we were having some technical difficulties. And for those who watch via Facebook, we apologize. We're not able to be on Facebook today, just with some technical difficulties that we were having. And so today we're on YouTube and Rumble today only. And due to the fast thinking of Eric, we were able to get some things solved and get audio and video on here today. So today's going to be really, really, really fun. For the sole purpose of the fact that, last week we talked about the peace deal that President Trump put together with Israel and Hamas and Egypt and Syria and Turkey and Qatar, et cetera, stuff like that. And we told you we had some concerns about it. And so did Israel, which is why the first point that they had was to make sure that Hamas and Gaza itself was demilitarized. And so all the protests about free Palestine have all vanished. Why? Because Israel adhered to the ceasefire, pulled back, and is not getting involved in the war further. Now, does that mean the war completely stopped? No, because you saw Hamas send people cross what is the yellow line. And let me just make a marker here in making there's actually a map that I want to show. Let me find it real quick, where it shows in the northern the lower portion of Gaza in Israel, where there is a demilitarized zone, and there were people that Hamas was sending, which was cross the yellow line. It basically made this like U-shape kind of up the coast. And so Hamas is testing this. They're seeing if the IDF is really going to adhere to this. And well, they also shot rockets at the IDF, and they sent these people, and the IDF shot them to kind of say, hey, this is the yellow line. We're going to adhere to this. And what you're seeing from this is you're seeing portions within Gaza kind of stand up and fight back against Hamas because they don't want to be ruled. There's high level of rumors and speculation that Israel is behind these groups. The clans is what they're calling them, families who are rising up against Hamas because they don't want to be ruled by Hamas because they saw what happened. And so when you hear the term Free Palestine, you can politely just say, yeah, we agree, Free Palestine from Hamas, so that these people can live without utter tyranny. And if you listen to Pastor Tim's podcast from the day, he talked about dealing with our anger and letting our anger not turn towards sin. And if you followed Pipeline long enough, that's been the big focus that we've been saying. Because when you listen and you hear the news, it can be one of those things that stirs you up in anger. And what we want to do is be able to have the knowledge and to be able to walk out what we're hearing in the news. And it's also a check of like, all right, if you see yourself getting angry, don't let that thing that triggers you cause you to let the rest of your life and the rest of your day more so be in anger, and let it cause anxiety, stress. Because what happens is we see this a lot, is you start to then see people start acting in self-righteousness because they're angry about a certain issue. They think things should be done in their timing, how they want, when they want. And the reality is sometimes we have to let those things lie out and play out via the test of time, which is where patience comes in. And what you see is that people end up making these moves and doing these things that are one, either not in the timeline of the Lord, or as if you heard yesterday's sermon, John talking about discernment, is people have these good ideas, but then it's the question of, is it a God idea? Because there's a lot of things logically that we can come up with in our minds, but we are faulty people. We only know in part and we speak in part. And when we miss portions of the part, when we can't have we have the ability to have the time to discern a little bit more, then we can walk out in fruit and walk out in patience and ultimately in that timeline of the Lord. And so when we get to that point of where we see ourselves be angry, it's a check of, okay, Lord, I'm angry. Notice it now. What do you want to do? And Pastor Tim did a really great job of lining out, look, there are times where the Lord's angry, and yeah, his judgment does come, but there's also the lamb portion, not just the lion portion. And so we have to walk that out. Now, one of the things that I'm seeing is a lot of the teaching from previous generations was that it was a sin to be angry. Unfortunately, as you see in Scripture, be angry, but do not sin, as we see in Ephesians. And so we see that, and we say that because I think it's something that needs a little bit of purification, where the Lord can come in and cleanse that. Now, I say all that to say, with this whole Free Palestine and the No Kings movement, is yes, I think everyone in the United States would agree. We don't want kings. If you understand the founding of America, they wanted to make General George Washington a king, and he said no. There was even they were trying to figure out names. I was reading a book to my kids this weekend. They were trying to figure out names for George Washington, and one of them was Your Majesty, and there were a bunch of funny other ones, but he denied that because that was the very thing that they were fighting against with the British. They didn't want a monarchy. They didn't want to have to be led by, somebody sitting in an ivory tower. They wanted to have, via their study of history, via their understanding of the corruption that comes with siloing out authority that is not placed at the Lord's feet. When it's placed in humans' feet, there's going to be corruption. And we see that, and our founders understood that. And I think that's something we have to remember. And so when you see these No Kings protests that happen, I'm going to play some clips from a few political leaders and really get to the bottom of this. Because the reality is yeah, nobody really agrees with them on the fact that that they have.
Let's start with the no.
That we have this idea of kings being put there before us. So let's play this first clip. This is when Speaker Johnson was asked the question about the No Kings protest.
Let's start with the No Kings rallies. You called these Hate America rallies. What do you mean by that?
Well, that collection of folks that I listed were certainly part of it. We congratulate them on a apparently violent free speech exercise. I was a First Amendment lawyer for 20 years. We defend that right. But the irony of the message is pretty clear for everyone. If President Trump was a king, the government would be open right now. If President Trump was a king, they would not have been able to engage in that free speech exercise out on the mall, by the way, which was open because President Trump hasn't closed it. In the last shutdown, 2013 era, President Obama closed the National Mall, it closed all the national parks, didn't allow people to engage in all this. So, I mean, they needed a stunt, they needed a show. Chuck Schumer needs cover right now. He's closed the government down because he needs political cover, and this was a part of it.
And obviously, Mike is very honed in on the aspect of the fact that the government shutdown is very, very, very the point of focus for the Democratic Party, and it's something that the Democrats need to be careful because they keep saying all these slogans and they keep backing down on in the past how government shutdown, that's horrible, and then here they are, they're given the opportunity and they're given the test of time, they're balking on the very principles that they're trying to persuade voters to come to. And what this leads up to is the coming midterm elections. We've talked about this before. We're going to keep hammering this point home where coming to these midterms elections, the people are going to have to decide across these states. And if we have time today, I want to talk a little bit about the Supreme Court case that got passed last week. The ruling came down in regarding to Louisiana and the voting district, because that plays a major, major role into all of this. But let's play. I'm going to play this one, Eric, if you can share my screen. When Trump's response when asked about this, I mean, this is him straight up answering this question of no kings.
What's your response to the protests over the weekend, the No Kings protests?
I think it's a joke. I looked at the people. They're not representative of this country. And I looked at all the brand new signs paid for, I guess it was paid for by Soros and other radical left lunatics. It looks like it was. We're checking it out. The demonstrations were very small, very ineffective, and the people were whacked out. When you look at those people, those are not representative of the people of our country.
Mr. President, besides San Francisco...
By the way, I'm not a king. I'm not a king. I work my ass off to make our country great. That's all it is. I'm not a king at all.
So, pardon the language, but Trump speaks directly to that. If he were a king, hey, he'd open everything up to do what he wants. He tried to force the end of the Ukraine war. He's tried to negotiate with Israel and Hamas and Qatar and Egypt and Turkey to end the Israel-Hamas war. And we're seeing it play out. And I could speak to this directly because I've seen it before on the abortion issue. These people are flown into these cities, and probably in some of these major cities, they live there, Chicago, San Francisco, New York, etc. But they're paid actors. And when you ask them the question, you just ask them, what is it you stand for? A lot of times they can't answer. You've seen those ad nauseum. And what we're finding now is that the leaders of these protests are telling people, don't talk to media. And you can see it. There was one with Charlie Kirk where he went up to somebody and asked him, well, what is it you're protesting? And then somebody comes up and interrupts him and says, don't talk to them. It's like, well, hold on there. They have a right to speak if they want to. And so this is the reality of the world we live in. And I think Trump, pointing out, okay, we're going to look into where the funding and everything comes from. That's a fine line there. This idea we talked about before, hate speech, one of the things we have to be very careful of, because the flip side of it is okay, right now people are saying things that you don't like. Well, what happens when somebody else is in power and you're saying things that they don't like? And if Trump isn't careful and Pam Bondi isn't careful, then these hate speech laws, which are just totally disastrous, will come back to bite believers in the rear end in the long run if we're not careful. We want to allow them to have the opportunity to speak. We want to allow them the opportunity to protest without burning down cities. The issue is, okay, if they did, going back to the summer of love in 2020 and 2021, when they did burn down cities, I mean, that needs to be dealt with. Obviously, whether it will under this administration or not is yet to be seen. But what we're seeing is this rhetoric heat up. And the major concern is this. If you saw yesterday, news came out that there was a deer stand near where Air Force One was, and it was cause for concern for the Secret Service. And the one thing about these No Kings protests is they are turning violent. And what happens is the people who are there may themselves not be violent, but what it does is the most deranged of the deranged, i.e. within the Charlie Kirk scenario, i.e. in the Butler, Pennsylvania scenario, where these people who in the sense of, how we speak of don't let your anger turn towards sin. They're not restricted by any spirit or anything. They're a lot of times motivated to do these things. And when you get into that place of self-righteousness, of thinking that what you want done, when you want it, how you want it, it angers you. It makes your blood boil. And what it is you, and teaching upon teaching we've done, is you go towards that place of violence. And what we're seeing now, because they've said it before, is they'll say things like this guy in Chicago who, on the perimeter of the No Kings protest, said these things. This is very concerning.
We gotta grab a gun. We gotta turn around the guns on this fascist system. These ICE agents gotta get shot and wiped out. The state machinery, that's a full display right there, has to get wiped out.
All because they're going around and dealing with the illegal immigrants who are bringing drugs into this nation, harming people, taking the lives of the Americans who are downtrodden, who are looking for relief from life, looking for relief from the struggles that they're going from. And because they think there should be open borders, let these people in, whatever. Now it's take the guns and turn it on them. This is the cause for concern. This is the rhetoric that is being put out there. This is the thing that has to be called out. Obviously, the right and a lot of believers are calling this out, but there are people on the left who have to call this out. In the past, they used to deal with this. You used to hear this, well, the left is in unison. They're all walking together, and this is their strength. And the right would kind of be independent thinkers, and you've had a lot of divide. But now you're seeing it where the left really doesn't have a leader. You have the more moderate wing trying to, i.e. your Chuck Schumers to a degree, trying to wrangle things together, but their positions are being challenged. And specifically with Chuck Schumer, the AOC challenging him for his seat in the Senate coming up this midterms. Very, very interesting. Now, whether she wins or loses will be seen, because she's going for the Senate. Well, that means her seat's up in the House. So it's an opportunity there for somebody to step in. Could be somebody worse than her or somebody better. That's up for her district to decide in reality. And so we want to call this out. We want to pray for clarity. And look, this is going to come down to local elections. When you have these instances where you have the state governor of Illinois and you have the mayor of Chicago calling out for direct defiance against this administration who's just trying to uphold the law, then we start to see the difference here. And we talked about it before with our resident historian, Randy Grigsby, talked about comparing it to 1930s Germany with the brown shirts. And a lot of this is motivated by the Antifa groups, is what we're seeing and coming out. And the administration is looking into that. Now the question is what is happening and what will happen with that. At what point can you actually do something legally about it? That's the big concern there. And so we see these things play out, and obviously we have the No Kings protests, the government shut down the ICE and everything playing out there. But we really see it boiling down to what's happening with the government right now. And here's a clip from one of the Sunday morning news shows, and explains the situation and where people's mindsets are at on both the right and the left.
Well, first of all, the president has been very active throughout this process, but it's also his position that this is a thing that the Senate needs to work out. A lot of our friends in the Senate have said that it was just bad optics for Democrats to open the government before the No Kings rally, and that now there's a shot that this week things will come together and very quickly the moderate Democrats will move forward and get us an open government, at which point we can negotiate whatever policies they want to negotiate with regular order. Now, I was very pleased to see that my friend Senator Shaheen from New Hampshire, a very sound-minded Democrat, came out and supported opening the government on Friday. So it means that there's sort of cracks in the Schumer armor. I think the Schumer shutdown is likely to end sometime this week. But I can tell you that if it doesn't, if it doesn't, if the story that we've been basically hearing from moderates that, look, we just can't do it in front of the No Kings rally, if that ends up not being true, then I think that the White House is going to have to look very closely, along with Russ Vought, at stronger measures that we could take to bring him to the table.
And what we're seeing here is the Democrats being called to the carpet on what they believe of how the government should be run. And the issue, Speaker Johnson has talked about is this argument, this debate on government funding. And we've talked about it before. And this is the reality, is the argument that Senator Schumer and Congressman Hakeem Jeffries are arguing is that illegals need to get paid their health care. And for all the libertarians out there who are sitting there saying, well, okay, we have $37 trillion in debt. We don't need to be involved in these quote unquote forever wars. We don't need to fund this nation, that nation. We need to isolate ourselves. We need to deal with our stuff. Okay, here we are dealing with our stuff. And Trump's point is, look, we can walk and chew gum at the same time. And the reality is, okay, now that this is before us, what are the decisions we're going to make? And this will have rippling effects going into the midterms. People are waking up to this. And I want to talk a little bit about the Supreme Court case the other day that we saw come out of the decision in the case around redistricting within Louisiana, whether it's constitutional and allowed via the states to draw lines either based upon race or political party, and what the Supreme Court said was, well, you really need to be able to not do it off of race, and you need to be able to possibly be able to do it. You can off of political party, and then the question becomes after this is, well, okay, do you then try to correlate? Do parties and states try to correlate what happens with the redistricting where they try to tie race to political party? And you saw that with Ketanji Brown Jackson, where she said, I mean, the just utter most insane thing, that all black people are disabled and they need to be able to, and Clarence Thomas just utterly rebuked her. In saying those things where, well, that we're all disabled, we need to be able to have these voting districts played out this way because of what? I mean, this is insane. And calling out and looking at what the definition of DEI is really, really key here. And I want to play this one clip. If you know the state senator from Virginia, Nick Frigides, he has on somebody, and he talked about what's going to happen with this ruling from the states. Because what's happening is there's a swing from congressmen, from Republicans and Democrats, and how they're going to split these states. In some instances, it's going to swing to the right and to the red. And in some instances, California and New York are going to try to swing it their way. And I want to play this portion of this clip. If you can pull it up here, go to my screen there. And really, hopefully this helps us understand this scenario, because I don't think I could explain it any better than what is said here.
Give you guys some visual illustrations of what's going on here. This is a map of Texas's congressional districts before they redrew their lines earlier this year. And this is according to the 2024 presidential results. Now, what's interesting about this is that there's a couple of seats here that are currently held by Democrats, these in the Rio Grande Valley, this one and this one. And then there's this one that stretches from Austin to San Antonio. There's an extra one in Houston, and then there's an extra one in the Dallas metro area. This is the new map that they just passed.
So the map before he just switched it was what it was before, where Democrats had a opportunity to have more seats. Because of this, this law from the Supreme Court, Texas redrew its maps midway through the decade. And then the map you're seeing right now, if you're watching via video, is there's a shrinkage, mainly down here towards the tip end of Mexico, down by the Gulf and by Mexico itself, of where it went from like slightly bluish, lighter reddish to hardcore right, moving in that direction. And then the areas where there was blue, they shrunk them and then spread them out. And he'll talk about that here with Tyler up
in
here in a second.
Texas. And you can even just look at the two of them and see visually
Like he's
the
flipping
difference.
back and
The Rio
forth. Look at
Grande
that.
Valley district's got a lot redder. The connecting district between Austin and San Antonio got destroyed. Al Green, you guys know who Al Green is. He's that obnoxious member of Congress that will just stand up there and like shout at the president during the State of the Union until he has to be escorted off the floor by the sergeant at arms. His district became like Trump plus 20. So he's gone.
Bye-bye.
He's gone. The extra Democrat seat in Dallas ended up being drawn out to like Tyler, or at least Tyler's down here, but out to East Texas, so she's gone. And so this will flip 5 seats. Well, Texas,
so that's 5 seats that historically or recently went Democrat that are going to go Republican. And you say, well, that's not right. They shouldn't be able to do that. Well, here's the opposite effect. Because later on, he goes and talks about Missouri and Kansas City, about how they're doing something very similar. But then we look at California, because this is what they're trying to combat here. And we're talking about electoral votes. We're talking about playing fair. Politics is kind of a blood sport. And so when we look at California, hear what he says here. Look at what Gavin Newsom and those there are trying to do in California to flip these seats, and ultimately in this vein of no kings, of trying to make sure Trump doesn't win. And the most hilarious thing, you saw Trump sending Gavin Newsom, and he responded to it, the Trump 2028 hats, and he's getting all upset about it. It's just an utter troll from Trump. I mean, he's troll master of troll. The idea is he's playing 4D chess. We can't forget, he is ultimately an entertainer. He's throwing them out there. Before Hakeem Jeffries and Speaker Johnson and Senator Schumer came into his office, he intentionally placed those same hats around his office just to rub them the wrong way. Like he's messing with them to a degree. But hear what they say. Okay, we see Texas redrawing its map, Louisiana trying to redraw its map. Now Missouri, there's going to be other states who do this. And here's California.
And finally, here's California. Here's Gavin Newsom's response. So this is the current map, again, under 2024 presidential lines. And there's that district I told you guys about in Northern California.
Pay attention to this. In Northern California, look how red that is. Look how red that is. And watch when he flips it to what the new maps are trying to be drawn from Gavin Newsom.
So this is the current map. California is retaliating against Texas. And this is what the new map is going to look like.
Look at that. That's insane. Look how many people are now not going to have representation for themselves.
And it's
that's nuts too, because Northern California, where
that entire area up there is red.
Yeah. And they're drawing it down to the Bay Area.
Yeah.
These districts, like, the counties up here, again, like the Jefferson area, they're drawing these districts down the Pacific coast all the way to like Marin and stuff, like everything on the north side of the San Francisco Bay from San Francisco is like going to be one deep blue district. Same thing with the second. They've cracked the Sacramento metro area to the point that the third district now has been obliterated.
I mean, look at that. And what they're saying there is where, okay, you have San Francisco down there on the Bay Area. Their votes are going to outweigh what happens in the north. So those people are going to not have representation of somebody who's from their district within their state. They're going to now have to go halfway across their state to get representation.
Even like the 9th and 13th, which are currently held by Democrats, but Trump narrowly won them. Those have been blown up. And there's 9 current Republican members of Congress right now. And Trump won 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 seats. And he almost won 12. There's this one in Orange County.
Yeah.
And this map reduces that 12 to 4.
Yeah.
Actually, technically 5. The 22nd did barely vote for Trump. And so the goal is to flip 5 Republican seats to offset Texas. So they might end up canceling each other out. It might still be a net gain of 1 because we might actually be able to hold on to the 22nd still. So that's what California's up to. And here's where things get really interesting, though, because Kansas is doing the same thing.
So we see that there. And the issue, if we go back to that map here, is now these people, the representatives here for San Francisco, don't want to go canvass, don't want to, when they have breaks in the state legislature, even in Washington, D.C., the federally, is they're supposed to go back to town hall. They can talk to their people, get to know their constituents. What are their constituents wants? Because they're supposed to be a representative of their constituents. And what these people are saying is, we don't want to go talk to them. We don't care about them enough. I mean, look at the switch here of the games that are being played from this. Oh, let's go back. Go back a little. I'll go back a little further. Go from this to now this. I mean, and the reason I bring this up is because this is what Democrats are doing. This is their response because they think, Trump's a king. He's ruling via whatever he wants. And then you have those on the right. Well, Trump's controlled by Israel. Which is it? Like which one is it? From the left or the right? And there's this thing of this idea, especially from libertarians right now. And if you find yourself in this camp, I'd ask you to really question and think about this logically. Is that you can't be America first and be pro-Israel. And when you take basic economics courses in basic literature, you read through this idea of both and or either or. And the reality is we can do both. It's not both and. It's not an either or. We can be America first, not be so singular focused, and understand that we need to have allies in the Middle East. Because let's go back to the 1800s when Thomas Jefferson was president. Why were the Marines created? If you ever research it, the term Barbary pirates, where they were holding hostage American sailors who through commerce were, going back to the old world to get supplies to bring back to the new world, but were captured. And if you remember the line, on the shores of Tripoli, because Thomas Jefferson had to send people to go in and free the American sailors who were there, who were being held hostage and captive by the Barbary pirates in 1804, that's why we have a Coast Guard. That's why we have the Marines. That's why we have a Navy. Well, we have all this military prowess because if we didn't combat these people and keep them at bay, Barbary pirates who were discriminatory towards nobody, they would take out our commerce, affect the people at home, eventually trying to come and harm, which is why you have the Coast Guard, American shipping lanes up and down the Atlantic coast. But in reality, it's okay. Now Thomas Jefferson said, we have to deal with this. We can't allow this to go forward. There's a little bit of history there. So in this Supreme Court case, we're seeing this outlay here of what's going to happen. There are going to be those on the right who change their maps and look at even re-changing their maps after this. In Ohio, they're looking at, if you could show this, Eric, in Ohio, they're trying to, with their redistricting, delay it, because if they delay it and they go through the process and they don't get something passed under, the old ruling, then eventually in Ohio, there's a way for them to just basically push it through via Republicans. Whether that's right or wrong, that's kind of up in the air. Nebraska's looking at it as well, looking at redistricting. There's Indiana as well as another one. There's upwards of a 20-seat swing towards the Republicans, which would be beneficial. Now, if that goes through, the onus is on Speaker Johnson, and if they're able to get Senate seats out of that, whoever's going to lead in the Senate, they're going to be put to task. Their seat will be on fire from the American people to rule this country and push this country into the right direction. And there were obviously, as we see these No King backlash protests, this idea come forward. And so we bring this up as prayer points because as we lead into this next these coming midterms, we see this stuff play out. And we see where this is headed, and okay, Republicans are doing things in the right manner, but there's also an opposite reaction. Daniel 7:25 talks about the wearing down of saints by the changing of times and laws and seasons. Some, depending on which translation you're reading there. And the point there is Daniel's getting an interpretation of an encounter he had where he saw the Spirit rise up to wear down the saints. And that's the point, and Pastor Tim talked about it, is there's this divide, there's this thing trying to stir us up, to cause us to seek our own vengeance. And in reality, vengeance belongs to the Lord. And we have to have this fear of the Lord come in our marriages, in our cities, in our workplaces, where we understand what is within our realm of authority to deal with, what the laws are in the books for us to be able to trust those who are in power to actually uphold the law and get back to a point of honoring the systems that are there. And so that's one of the things why we want to talk about this and bring this up, is understanding the mind decay that is trying to come in from these paid actors who are protesting off of these perfect, in some instances, cardboards, that the cutouts that they have of all this stuff. And what we're seeing is nothing different than what we saw in the abortion debates. If you ever saw those, the same exact thing. Remember one time John and I went down to Austin, where they were having a Texas state hearing where people from Texas could come and talk about where they stood, so that the people who are being represented could let their representatives know what was happening. We were from Texas. We were from Louisiana. We went to Texas to support a Texas group there, and we were able to get in line and go in and sit in the room, not to testify, but to just sit in the room and hear what was being said. And what we heard was an overwhelming majority of people from that state say they did not want the increasing of the weeks that somebody could get an abortion. But you saw these paid actors who were outside, who were loud, and some of them got inside and were loud and causing a ruckus. And you would go and ask them where they're from, and they say, "Oh, I'm from San Francisco. I'm from Chicago. I'm from somewhere." And if you've ever been in some of the major airports, you see those same people walking through. It's just amazing to see how this happens. And then when you ask them questions, what do you stand for? They don't know. And the question is, well, why aren't Republicans protesting? Republicans have jobs. That's kind of the key point there. I bring all that up to clearly lay out the No Kings protest, how we got there, where we're going. And where we're going is this next election. Whether we like it or not, whether we want to ignore it or not, Israel's going to be a hot topic. The government shutdown, the government debt, military conflicts are going to be a hot topic. And what we're seeing now come out of Israel, and we talked about it before, is Hamas attacking and killing Palestinians who are there, who are rising up to fight against them because they want their own freedom, because they want what Israel wants. They want Hamas to demilitarize and not be in a position of authority in Gaza and in Judea and Samaria, which leads us to, if we're looking further to 2028, I want to play this clip from a JNS where they talk about J.D. Vance, because it brings up some interesting questions. There's a debate about whether he'll be the next president and whether he'll run for president. Most likely, it looks like he will. If he keeps on the track that he's on, of standing behind Trump, thoroughly supporting him, you're going to see a lot of the MAGA base swing his way. But a question that is rising up now and is being asked, because on the conservative right, the religious right, and non-religious right, you're seeing this issue of questions about Israel. Should we support Israel or should we not? The whole Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson debate. We've said where we lie on that. And I think our discernment on that has played out properly if you've seen just where Candace Owens has been. But this question on JD Vance comes up, and this is from the Jewish News Syndicate that asked this question because they're in Jerusalem, because they have some questions about JD Vance and understanding where he comes from, just so we know who we're getting into bed with, if we're going to stand behind him or not.
Alex, at the same time, JD Vance scheduled to arrive tomorrow, as you said. Significance of his trip, is he just following up on everything going on? Is this another initial push, perhaps, towards those normalization deals? I mean, why is he coming at this juncture?
Well, I don't know that Vance is really behind the signing of the normalization deals. Also, you mentioned Trump's speech. Trump didn't actually mention Vance in the speech. He mentioned he talked about Marco Rubio likely going down as the greatest Secretary of State in American history. He talked on and on about Witkoff and how great a guy he is and why everybody likes him.
Hegseth.
And he mentioned Hegseth in this Secretary of War, and he mentioned also Jared Kushner and his unique brain and his ability to get things done. Didn't mention Vance at all. And perhaps it's because actually Vance has been, on the less on the pro-Israel side than all the others. I mean, you see that Vance was hosting the Charlie Kirk show on the Monday after Kirk was murdered, that very first show that they did. And who did he have on? He had Tucker Carlson. And Tucker Carlson was belittling Netanyahu on that program, talking about how disgusting and disturbing it was that Netanyahu made a comment about how pro-Israel Charlie Kirk was, which Charlie Kirk was extremely pro-Israel. And Vance didn't say a word about it when Tucker was stating that in front of him. And I think that there's a lot of people that are worried about the pro-Israel credentials of J.D. Vance. Now, this won't be the first time Vance is coming. I just recently saw a picture.
So he's visiting Israel to see, what's going on with the Hamas deal, obviously, as things have heated up. And the question becomes is, where does he stand? Because if you didn't know that, Tucker Carlson's son is J.D. Vance's press secretary. So there's a lot of questions of why certain things have leaked out via the White House recently in regards to Israel and the attacks in Doha, in Qatar. Some believe it. Whether it's true or not, we don't know. Tucker Carlson might have been involved there because his son is his press secretary, and it's an alignment there that is very concerning and alarming, to say the least, with where Tucker Carlson has said some things. And the point is the most confusing thing is, in the past, Tucker Carlson himself said different things. Whether he truly believes them or not is I think we'll never know. Only he knows. But what we're seeing with these people like Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, is before, when they had some guardrails around them, they said certain things. And then now that the guardrails are gone and people are helping them flesh out ideas, we're seeing the avenues that they're going down. And I talked about this before: conspiracy versus conspiracy theory. You can believe in a conspiracy because it's backed by facts, but when you get to the point of as some people have said, I don't know, but I know type things, based upon their own intuition, that is not based on facts whatsoever. You get into the conspiracy theory realm, and you go down rabbit holes that, unfortunately, there are no conclusions to. And you can look at this No Kings protest as that. Okay, these people, we don't want a king. Trump's a king. Well, based upon what? Because they're fighting legally to ask a question that has been asked before on how to redraw redistricting maps, whether it be on race or political party. Okay, the Supreme Court's coming out through that. They're fighting that legally. And more so, the state of Louisiana itself is fighting that legally. We don't want a king. Well, yeah, Trump would agree. I'm not a king. I don't just sit back in my throne and dictate to people, you do this, you do that. He struggles to the point where they've tried to assassinate him before. And they still are trying to take him out, which is why we need to pray covering for him. And I think a point there with J.D. Vance is we don't really know where he lies. He has his associations. I'm not saying just because he employs Tucker Carlson's son within his press office, within his inner circle, as the problem of problems within of itself. Because what if his son disagrees? Tucker Carlson's son disagrees with him on this issue. We don't know. And so these are things that are going to be fleshed out, things to pray for. There's rumors with what his wife believes as a concern again, we don't know. We're just finding out about him. We like him up until this point, but there's a lot that we don't know. And if he's going to be, the candidate that we may or may not get behind, there's something to pray about. And I know Clay Nash has put out his word where he believes he'll be the candidate and wants to start praying for him. Yes, let's start. And that's why we're joining in with him on that and making sure, we are hearing clearly from the Lord of, all right, is this the man you want, Lord? Is this who we should be pushing for? Is this who we be getting behind our full effort for? Because the left is going to be coming after it because they think, hey, they're trying to dictate. Well, the American people voted. And as President Obama has said, elections have consequences. Now, they mentioned something there about Witkoff and Jared Kushner, and something I want to play in this same interview is in an interview with 60 Minutes, Steve Witkoff said Jared Kushner sat down and answered questions about some of the strikes from the IDF in Qatar. And I want you to hear this because this is why we've had some concerns about them. And the reason I want to play this and the reason we want to pray about this is because these guys have the ear of President Trump. And whenever they get in the room, they say these things. This is why things go amok. And we want to make sure we understand, we have the knowledge so that we don't perish.
It's supposed to air this evening. And from what I understand, there was a preview of the interview with Witkoff and Kushner. And Witkoff says that he felt betrayed by Israel's airstrikes targeting senior Hamas leaders in Doha, Qatar last month in the midst of negotiations to free the hostages and end the war.
Both Jared and I felt, I just feel we felt a little bit betrayed.
Now, I had heard that the president, that he was furious.
I think he felt like the Israelis were getting a little bit out of control.
How significant is it that Witkoff...
And so here we see Witkoff talking about how he felt, and then Kushner wisely repositioning that statement and pushing it back on Trump. And part of that interview is good because it to the right who says Israel controls Trump, controls America, shows, okay, there's some pushback there as there has been pushback before. So that kind of blows that narrative up. But number two is this also shows how much influence Kushner has. He's very wise. He has some funding from those who we're negotiating with on the opposite side, which is cause for concern. But then also is he has the old school mindset of giving up land for peace, which has been utterly disastrous. Now, the positive thing is Trump is his own man. He thinks for himself. And he's going to rule how he thinks should be ruled. And in agreement in a lot of instances of what we've seen with Israel, where in this peace deal, there has been no give up on land. It's been, okay, you can continue to live in this area, but you're going to live on our terms. You have to demilitarize. You have to remove weapons. We need to, as they have done before. You've read The Son of Hamas. We talked about that last week, how they want to see these people prosper. They want to see them do well. They want to get them educated. They want to make sure they're healthy, even to the point of when they try to blow them up, they still try to give them the medical care, still try to give them education, give them jobs. Because the thought is, well, the natural thought is, well, they're only doing this because they're economically deprived. The question is, why are they economically deprived? Because they've been given billions of dollars over the last 20 years, but it keeps going to the main six people on top who live in Qatar. And the question is, at what point will the people who live within Gaza and Judea and Samaria wake up to the reality of this? And that's the key point. And so I want to close today with a little bit of reading from our Declaration of Independence, because if you've never actually read it, it outlines not only, yes, we're separating from the monarchy, King George, it also tells why, what they were doing. And when you actually read through it, I'm going to read just a few portions of it, because I think if we see there of, okay, we're separating ourselves from people and from the king and from the British rule because of why. And this is the understanding of dealing with this. And in there, they talk about how some of the effects that the British have put on them. How it says one of the phrases is he has refused for a long time after such disillusions to cause others to be elected. Basically allowing the local representation within the colonies to have there. They have obstructed the administration of justice by refusing his assent to laws establishing judiciary power, basically letting the people there rule themselves. It goes on to say at some portions of this he has combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our constitution, the continental constitution that they had before the Bill of Rights and the constitution that we have now, and unacknowledged by our laws, given his assent. It later goes on to talking about for cutting off our trade for all parts of the world, for imposing taxes on us without our consent, for depriving us in many cases of the benefit of trial by jury, which is what we see in our constitution and Bill of Rights, for transporting us beyond seas to be tried for pretended offenses. And then later on, it goes through and actually talks about how I'm trying to find the portion where it talks about how they have in every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. A prince whose character is thus marked by every act which may be defined a tyrant is unfit to be the ruler of a free people. And it goes on to talk about in portions where they have burned down our cities. Is at times, here's one portion. Here's what I'm trying to find. It has plundered our seas, ravaged our coasts, burnt our towns, and destroyed the lives of our people. Let me say, burnt our towns. This is in our Declaration of Independence. I have this great book. I'm a big fan of Costco. They sold this at Costco. I think they actually sold it at Sam's as well. It's a lot of the major writings, and it's our Declaration of Independence. It's not cursive, so anybody can read it. It's in manuscript. And it talks about it. He has at this time transported large armies of foreign mercenaries, people who we call the Haitians, i.e. the Germans, is what they're talking about there, to complete the works of death, dissolution, and tyranny, already being with circumstances of cruelty and perfidy scarcely paralleled in the most barbarous ages and totally unworthy of the head of a civilized nation. He has constrained our fellow citizens, taken captive on the high seas to hear arms against their country, to become the executioners of their friends and brethren, or to fall themselves by their hands. He has excited domestic insurrections amongst us, and has endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of our frontier, the merciless Indian savages who've known rule of warfare is an indistinguishable destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions. That's what a king does. And want to look at, okay, the destruction here that was written about in our Declaration of Independence, of savaging the people, burning down towns, ruining people's lives, causing friends to be executioners of their own friends where they grew up. That's what a king does. You have to ask yourself, is that what our king is doing? Or our president is doing, who is not our king? Our king is the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, who sits on the throne in heaven. And as believers, we perish with a lack of knowledge. And we bring this before you. I know it can be intense at sometimes, and we try to keep it informative as best we can and lighthearted as best we can. But the reality is this is the bloodthirsty narrative that is being put out there with this No Kings protest. And then Lori, who we'll hear from tomorrow, talked about, you're having all these problems today because you're talking about the No Kings protest. Very well could be true with our technology. So we thank each and every one of you for following along here today. Be sure to like, share, subscribe on our Rumble, YouTube, and if you are on Facebook, follow us on Facebook group page, the Pipeline Report for the President. You can search it in there, and this is the reality that we're dealing with here. If somebody is a king, they'll do things like this. Bashar al-Assad, Saddam Hussein, the Ayatollahs in Iran, of ruling with an iron fist in their nations. In Russia, in China, where you're seeing underground pastors being arrested and some even being executed. That's what a king does. Not allowing your opponents to protest rightfully and freely in your nation, to say things against the most just outlandish things against you. That's not what a king does. And believe me, Trump would love to shut it up, but he can't, because the laws within our nation don't allow him to do that, because he is not a king, which go back to the founding of our nation with our first president, George Washington, who refused to be a king because he understood that we have to be a nation ruled by a set of principles in order for us to succeed. And if we didn't have those rules, and if we didn't have those principles to guide our nation by, and allowing somebody else to be at the head for a time being, and with the three branches of government, then we weren't going to succeed. And this experiment that we have in America is teetering on failure if we as a nation don't fully step into the authority, and as a church, step into the authority that we have. And we could get off into the initial constitutions of each state and how they required certain things. And hopefully we'll more and more will come to understand that, because the battle is raging. And if we're not careful to keep our anger in check, and it causes us not to sin, but causes us to lay at the feet of Jesus in seeking him to renew our minds in that instance, as we see in Romans, to get clarity of mind, to walk with the Spirit, to be in that place of peace, so we don't step out of authority where we might have to see our justice done and get into self-righteousness in that case. And so with that, again, hopefully this is informative. Hopefully this helps you guys in this no kings debate of where we've been and where we're going, because this leads up to the midterms a lot with the redistricting and the battle that Speaker Johnson is fighting through in trying to get a budget passed so that they can look at the next CR that they're going to do. And you got to understand this, a lot of this is dealt with the hand that Speaker Johnson has been dealt with from the Kevin McCarthy era. A lot of these deals were made in advance. Hey, we'll just keep pushing this along. And Mike's saying, look, enough's enough. We can't keep pushing this along. We have to deal with this stuff. And this is the bit that they're trying to deal with now. And the next time it'll be some healthcare funding. Then the next time it'll be something else, hopefully to where they can get back on track beforehand. And we want to pray for our leaders in that, pray for President Trump to, keep his sanity and not let his anger get out of control. And he has some good people, very good people around him who are helping him with that. And we want to pray and support them. But then also, as we look forward into the days ahead, looking at J.D. Vance, praying we understand clearly, praying we hear the Lord clearly on whether he's the right man for the job as we move into the next presidential election. So there's a lot to stay informed on, a lot to stay up to date on. We thank you. Thank you for hanging in there with us on our technical difficulties today. And we hope to be back next week as well, here live in studio. Pastor Tim will be back as he's on his way back. And be sure to listen to his podcast today. Very informative, very dealing with the heart of this issue with the No Kings protest in a spiritual sense. And he goes through, if you want some scriptures, he goes through in depth in scriptures of what the battle is, one spiritually, but then how to combat it scripturally, and to have scripture walking with us as we navigate these political seasons that we are in. So blessings to each and every one of you for following along. Again, my name's Zach Karskad, and you have Eric Lawley behind the camera producing today. And we thank you all. We'll be back next week. And if we don't see you till then, have a good one.